I would say the relationship between the grandfather and the grandson, specifically the older grandson, is probably the central relationship of my show. Um, I should say I've gotten really sick of this pattern with a lot of different superhero media where there seems to be this vested interest in making every normal, non powered character into a superhero as well, right? So, like, you had Pepper Potts become Rescue, you had recently Mary Jane was Venom. And, I tried to explain to people that I understand, again, on a surface level, where it's appealing to have everyone have powers because we get sick of damsels in distress and whatnot. But sometimes, tropes and general roles of characters and stories are there for a specific reason. There is a certain level of validity to having a character who has no powers surrounded by people who do. So, like with the grandparents, they're both normal people, no special abilities, no special DNA, just regular individuals, but they have grandsons who have powers. The best friend of the older grandson has powers, the babysitter has powers. And where they shine is through their life experience. These are people who've been alive for over 60 years each, right? They together have, I'd say, about 80 years of working experience, which sometimes comes into factor when, they offer advice in terms of how to use these abilities, where to go to maybe practice. And you really see where there's a certain value to, again, having characters who do not have superpowers, because when they're able to do something, when they're able to contribute to the plot of a story, it sends home this message that you don't have to be extraordinary to do something of significance. Across the first season, some of my favorite scenes are where characters just talk. I have a lot of fight scenes. I don't think there's a single episode that doesn't have at least a fight in it. But I really like it when, either the grandfather or grandmother will just talk to one of the younger characters. Because one of the things I've gotten sick of with media as well is that when there are portrayals of family, they make them very dysfunctional. Like, I love Fantastic Four, the original Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, 100 plus issue run, but I I try to keep most of the dialogue of disagreement relatively lighthearted, right? Some teasing, oh, you ate too much of this, or you're going to be missing your favorite food. But, I generally like to kind of convey the idea that these are people who love each other, who actually like doing things together, who, on a Monday, they might go to stop a robbery. On Tuesday, they might go and drive to the store and talk about what they saw on TV the last day. And I think, when you have a story like this where you see a lot of things from the older grandson's perspective in terms of, all these different supervillains popping up, but then you have that grandfather who, again, has no powers, but is able to pull him in and say, hey, you can do this. Let's try this. Let's think of that. I think it really grounds the story, right? You need and this goes back to my point of, like, you need regular people in semi-prominent roles to have a certain degree of realism. I should also say, I never want to make, sound like I'm telling this grandiose tale that is so different from anything anybody else ever done. I don't have that kind of an ego, but I do try to justify to myself the purpose of making this, the purpose of wanting to do it. And a lot of that comes from, can this be distinct enough to even, in my view, justify its existence? And one of those distinctions is the lack of a secret identity. Now, of course, again, tropes. When villains know who a hero really is, it puts their family in danger. But also, secret identities have been used to stoke conflict between a hero and their loved ones, right? And you have some people who, for example, are of certain, orientations regarding their romantic choices, who many times see superheroes like coming out and revealing their identity to like coming out in terms of their sexuality. And with my grandparents, who the grandparents on shore based off of, there was always a certain level of acceptance I felt with them to where I couldn't fathom like a scenario where, realistically I would ever have such a like major part of myself like, having powers or some other thing that is, that would be considered abnormal or otherwise not like most people and not tell them about it. And again, I remove that component as well because I really like the idea of there being a family where it was just this couple. They had a son. Son moved out, whatever. He had a kid. They took care of the kid. The kid ends up having powers, and then the son has another kid with somebody with the mother, right? That kid has powers as well, and just kind of sort of having this little small tight knit group of relatives who have each other's back. Again, they might tease each other here or there, but it's never anything really serious, and the most important thing to them is each other. And also, his inclusion does represent something of a coming of age story where, you have the older grandson who's like 20, 21, the younger grandson who's like probably like 6 or 7, because they have a relatively large gap between them. And, with the younger grandson, he's a lot more inclined to go, oh yeah, Papa, yeah, and, just kind of agree with whatever he says. Whereas the older one, by virtue of now being an adult, albeit a young adult, he's a lot less willing to just go along with whatever he says, more questioning of authority, and really just sort of, representing this idea that, of course, there is always a certain level of respect that you have for the person that raised you, took care of you. But as you get older, you start developing critical thinking skills, and that plays into how much you're going to go along with whatever you're told. And again, it's very important to me to because like I made a video about the dynamic between the main villain and the older grandson, but it's very important to me to get that relationship between the grandfather and the grandson, at least the elder grandson, the focus it needs to really be believable as, one cannot live without the other, that they are so important to each other that if you were to remove one from the other's life, it would be like having an arm ripped off. A lot of stories, they'll have characters like fake a death, right? And people will say, oh, this is just a cheap way to scare the audience. No way you kill this character off. But sometimes that's done to get characters to talk about someone in a way that they normally would not, right? So like the two of them being, adult males are not going to just sit there and go, oh, I love you, right? And just throw into each other's arms, right? You might see a hug there. How are you? Some other type of greeting. But in any scenario where one thinks the other is in extreme distress or possibly even deceased, you see the panic and the freak out and the genuine anguish at the thought. Because I maintain that when someone has a person that truly cares about them, especially if it's a father, a grandfather, a grandmother, a mother, it can present them with the belief of self-worth, the belief that they can accomplish things, and in some cases when that connection is severed by the person's untimely passing, it can be extremely difficult and damn near impossible to get over them. And given that I try to portray the elder grandson as like being a lot more forthcoming with emotion than his little brother, who's kind of trying to do like the whole tough guy thing. He actively admits that if something happened to his grandparents, he would be a lot worse off and essentially be dead without actually dying. Just kind of be a hollowed out version of his past self from when they were around. So it's I try to really demonstrate just how important they both are to him, but they're significant for different reasons, and we'll get into that in other videos and in the actual show. So just me rambling about it again.